The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Staffordshire for the first time in quite a while. It's been ages since we did the Staffordshire Moorlands, and that series is still ongoing. This is a part of Staffordshire we've never touched before. This is Newcastle under Lyme. There are only 11 parishes here, so we won't be here for very long, but they're all huge. This is probably one of the biggest. Welcome to the place where Lemmy of Motorhead once lived. This is Madeley. Madeley, Madders clearing. Hello everyone in Staffordshire, I'm back. Now this weekend we're beginning the district of Newcastle under Lyme. It only has 11 parishes, but these are among some of the largest that Staffordshire has on offer. This one's enormous. Today we're in Madeley. Madeley should not be confused with another parish of the same name over the border in Shropshire. That one's in Telford, this one is very much Newcastle under Lyme. Madeley sits on the A525 and shares a border with War in Shropshire. It's split into 3 parts, which over time have merged together somewhat to form one big village. They are Middle Madeley, Little Madeley and Madeley village itself. There's also Madeley Heath, which is considered by many to be part of it, but it's still separated from the rest by a green belt. Madeley's name is Anglo-Saxon and derives from Madder, a female personal name. Most of its history is centred around the road that runs through it all. Almost everything of note was, and in some cases still is, on the A525. That said, you do have to go a bit further afield for some other stuff. For example, the parish contains the earthwork remains of Heighley Castle, and there's the remains of a massive coal mine to the northeast at Lycett, and it also includes the village of Onneley on the Staffordshire-Shropshire border. In short, this is a lengthy one, so let's hit the road. Madeley as a parish is far too big to put into one map. There are going to be several of them here because the size of this one is enormous. It stretches from the Shropshire border in the west to the outskirts of Newcastle under Lyme in the east. You can at least see from this the separate areas that formerly defined it, which have now merged together into one big conurbation. Maybe not the right word there, but you get the idea. You can't see Onneley here, nor can you see Madeley Heath, but you're about to. Let's have a look at all of those places in turn. This is Onneley. It's the village that borders Shropshire to the west, and part of it lies within War. There were 3 landmarks of note in it, all along what's become the A525. They are the church, a chapel, and the Wheatsheaf pub. Only 2 of those are still there now because the chapel has gone. Onneley looks a little different now too. The road is the same, but to the north there's been a bit of a change. A golf course has come along, which has altered the landscape, literally. Madeley was much more of a clustered settlement in 1900. Because expansion hadn't happened yet, most of it was based around this area, just to the east of the West Coast Main Line. Loads of things still stand in this section, the church, the school, and the old hall being the 3 that stick out. Note too, there was a row of almshouses and a chapel near the railway line. Both of those are still standing as well. Running through it all was the River Lee, dammed to the north, forming Madeley Pool. The north of the village was very sparsely populated. Note here how a lot of it was covered by the parkland of the modern Madeley Manor. Loads of that land has now been built on. To the east, Middle Madeley and Little Madeley were discernible separate settlements. Madeley Mill is marked on the pool, as is the Greyhound Inn on the bend in the road. The mill is still there, but the Greyhound is not. Nowadays, this section of the village is the one that's changed the most, as you'll see when we start walking around. Over in Madeley Heath, it's a similar story. This is now way more residential. In these times, it was a hive of industry. Look right in the centre of the village and you can see there's a brickworks. Coal shafts were marked all over the place. There's one right here. Madeley Heath had a church and a pub called the Old Swan. Both of them are still here, although the church has now become something else. The brickworks would turn into a playing field called Talk Park. This is Layset, or Leaset, which is only partially within Madeley's boundaries. However, it will be covered here because the important part was the colliery, and that was within them. All of this area, a mass of railway lines and coal shafts, was the huge Madeley Pit. Leaset village was to the south of it, served by its own station. The vast majority of the village has now gone, and the pits are a distant memory too. To look at Leaset on a modern map, you'd think it was nothing. Wrong. It was everything to Madeley Heath. And then to the north of it all is this place. What you're looking at here is Heighley Castle, which hasn't changed at all since the early 1900s. Marked here are the remains of it, and they sit on top of a hill overlooking the entire parish. This is the only part of Madeley that's still the same now. So this is what Madeley looks like today. It's had a lot of new builds since the time of those maps. New houses now occupy the west and the north, which was all fields or parkland. The main road hasn't changed though. The A525 still runs through Madeley for its entire length. So this is how we're going to get around this village, and trust me, it's a lot longer of a walk than this will look. Before we even get to Madeley, we'll drive through Onneley and catch its various bits. Once we're here, we'll get going at the College Gardens estate to the north. Heading south, we'll make a beeline for the Madeley Pool, the big lake that a lot of people know the place for. On that, there's the mill, so we'll cover that at that point. Then it's a huge housing estate to the west, which is flanked by the West Coast Main Line. We'll need to cross that railway line afterwards in order to get to Manor Lane. At that point, we'll be talking about football because that's where Madeley White Star play their games. To get back over the railway, we'll use a footbridge that was part of an old railway station. Then we'll go back north along the A525, which will take in the church, the old school and the Offley Arms. Our last job will be to cross Middle Madeley Park back to the start, but that's only half of Madeley's story. In this one, we need a second walk around Madeley Heath. After crossing the M6, we'll park here in Madeley Heath and walk around this. Madeley Heath is a very different place with a hugely industrial past that involved coal heavily. As we walk around this route through it, we'll learn just how industrious this once was. Even after this, we're not finished. Our last job will be to make our way west again up to the site of Heighley Castle, which is on the boundary with Betley. Put simply, Madeley is a huge parish, way bigger than it looks on the map. We have a serious job on our hands today, so let's do it. Let's get started with the village of Onneley, which sits on the border between Staffordshire and Shropshire. Onneley is the first place you pass through on the A525 when you drive east from War. Part of it sits within War Parish, but the vast majority of it is in Madeley. Landmark number 1 is the church here in Onneley. This is pretty much right on the border with Shropshire, and so when you cross it from War, the church is the first thing you see. But is this a church? The old OS maps told us it is, but is it still a church these days? Well, the answer is no. This was indeed a church, but these days it's Onneley Village Hall. It was originally built as a dual-purpose school and chapel in 1871 by Lord Wilton. The chapel was the mission church of St Chad and occupied the right-hand side of the building. The rest was Onneley Church of England Primary School, which ceased to be viable in 1966 and then closed. It then became the village hall, and it was put into trust on the 19th of September 1967 in name of the vicar and the church wardens at All Saints Church in Madeley. As the financial burden of running and maintaining a village hall fell upon the residents of Onneley, a village hall committee was formed. A succession of resilient villagers have joined the committee over the years to help manage and maintain the hall. Today, the hall is in a very good condition. As well as a church, Onneley had a Methodist chapel. However, that building hasn't survived into the present day. It was located a little further along the A525 towards Madeley. You'll have to look very carefully here because we're driving, but keep your eyes on the right of the screen. There's a patch of rough, overgrown waste ground which is likely where the chapel was sited. While we're on the subject of chapels, Onneley had another one that was linked to the Knights Templar, and not a lot of people know about it. Onneley passed from the Templars to the Knights Hospitaller, but their chapel here fell into ruins in the 16th and 17th centuries, not long after Henry VIII did his thing. Now only earthwork remains of the chapel are left, which was part of the holdings of their Templar preceptory at Keele. Early county maps of Staffordshire, namely Saxton's map of Staffordshire in 1577 and Speed's map of Staffordshire in 1611, show that the chapel still existed at these times. It's quite likely it was built of stone or was timber framed. A number of Templar chapels were round with a rectangular chancel. It's thought that the chapel was a pilgrimage destination, and that's perhaps the main reason for its survival into the 17th century, because the area was otherwise quite remote and had very little in the way of population. Let's be fair, the actual parish church was located in Madeley. So where was this chapel? Well, it's a bit hard to find, but it was located on a piece of land known only today as Chapel Field. It's off a lane which is now mainly defunct and exists only as a dead-end road. It once extended northwards towards Rhinehill and Betley through the site of Rhinehill Hall. Now we're at the Wheatsheaf Inn between Onneley and Madeley. This pub has a long history going back to 1769 when it started serving ale as a coaching inn. The inn has been modernised in recent years, but the old beams and open fires are still in place, making it a cosy, intimate place for a drink. You can eat here too. Food is served in the bar or in its restaurant. The Wheatsheaf is also licensed for weddings, civil partnerships and naming ceremonies, and the best bit about that fact is that it has the absolute perfect backdrop for photographs. North of the Wheatsheaf is Onneley Golf Club, which sits on the western slopes of Bar Hill. It's a quiet and scenic spot, yet readily accessed from both the A34 and the A51, as well as the M6. From the highest point of the course, there are broad views across Staffordshire, Shropshire and Cheshire. From the course, you can see as far as the Long Mind and the Wrekin in the southwest, and the distant Welsh hills beyond Beeston and Peckforton to the northwest. You can also see the Cheshire Plain, the iconic Jodrell Bank radio telescopes, the Staffordshire moorlands and the Pennine foothills. It opened in 1968 as a 9-hole course on rented land. Today the club has grown to 18 holes on land that it owns, and it remains committed to developing it to keep up with modern trends. As part of this, it has its own borehole used for the extraction of groundwater to maintain the greens. Improved drainage has helped in recent years too, meaning this isn't just a summer course. You can enjoy a round of golf at Onneley all year round, even in the very wettest winter conditions. Visitors may be very pleasantly surprised by how much this has developed in the past decade. Okay, well, thankfully it's stopped raining now. Right on cue actually, because now it's time to start our main walk around Madeley. This is going to be quite a lengthy walk as well. There's loads to see here. Let's get to it. We start our walk in Madeley on a housing estate. Now to the untrained eye, this might appear to be nothing special. How many times though have you heard me say that? This estate sits on what used to be Madeley College, a local centre for further education. As well as focusing on home economics, Madeley College was used to train PE teachers. It remained in use until 1982 when it was moved to the Physical Education Department of Staffordshire Polytechnic, which is now Staffordshire University. That's located in Stoke-on-Trent. Previously known as the County of Stafford Training College, its buildings were occupied gradually as the original site at Nelson Hall was wound down after being its home since 1949. By the autumn of 1970, there were over 1,200 students resident in its halls. Those residents came from all around the country and beyond too. There were also several day students from the locality. As well as a full-size swimming pool, the college offered a gymnasium, a 24-booth language laboratory, a fully equipped stage and an excellent library. Now though it's all lost, but this estate still remembers what used to be here. This is the College Gardens housing development, which now stands proud in place of this once great educational establishment. Fortunately, it's a very pleasant development too. After walking south for a short way, we find ourselves at the Madeley Centre. This is the modern village hall, and it's not been here all that long. Here's how it came about. Madeley used to have an old village hall, which was becoming a bit of a burden. It was too expensive to maintain. There was also once a scout hut in the village too. At the same time, that was becoming unsafe and the floor was rotting. You can probably see where this is going already. For 10 long years, a small committee of volunteers worked towards securing a piece of land for a brand new community building. The idea was for the new building to amalgamate what both of the old ones provided, and offer more at the same time. The Madeley Centre was the result, and now this serves the village and the surrounding areas, providing the facilities needed to run activities and events for everyone's benefit. During the project's planning period, the council decided to close Lee House, which was an old people's residential home on Furnace Lane. The closure left Madeley with fewer residential beds than it really needed for elderly people needing a certain level of care. And so the project team managed to negotiate with the council to buy the land upon which Lee House had been built to use for a new extra care facility. Named Lee Court, it has 63 two-bedroom apartments for the over 55s. They get the care they need from a dedicated on-site team. When the old village hall was surrounded by builders' fences, rumours flew around the village that there was to be a development of 180 houses here, but thankfully this was not the case. However, it could have been because house building companies originally wanted this land. The centre was officially opened in 2011 by none other than Madeley's local hero, former England footballer Gordon Banks, OBE. For a number of years, Banks lived in Madeley Heath, having moved here during his time with Stoke City in the late 1960s. In 1972, he was involved in a car crash close to his home. Fragments of glass perforated his right eye and damaged the retina, and he needed 100 microstitches to the eye and a further 200 to his face. He died here in 2019, at his home and in his sleep. So as you can probably tell, it's early in the morning. It's a Saturday morning today, and it's about 7:10. I actually stayed in Madeley last night. I stayed on the College Gardens estate in a house there. And for food last night, I sampled Tang's Dynasty, which is the Chinese takeaway in that row of shops over there. We'll talk a bit more about those shops later, because that's going to be towards the end of this route. What we're going to do now is take a right turn and head towards Madeley's biggest and most well-known feature, I reckon. That would be the mill. After turning a corner into Moss Lane, we find ourselves outside what's maybe Madeley's best known feature. This is Madeley Mill, which stands on a dam. On the other side of the road is a big pool, which used to be the mill pond. This mill has a significant history. During its time, the mill was used for grinding grain, but prior to its closure, production was turned over to cheese making. It fell into disrepair before being developed and converted into apartments in the early 1990s, saving it from demolition, which had been proposed by the local council. And And here's the pool. As well as being a mill pond, this was once part of Madeley Manor House's landscaped grounds. This has several uses today, despite the fact that the mill has stopped making anything. The pool has long been a local spot for fishing and leisure. Over the centuries, its surroundings grew dense with woodland, creating an eerie setting that's inspired many tales of the supernatural. Local folklore tells a tragic story of a woman who drowned in this pool. Her spirit is said to linger, often appearing as a misty figure along the water's edge. Visitors have reported hearing unexplained splashes, even when the lake's surface remains calm, and some believe the ghost attempts to lure men towards the water. On foggy nights, witnesses have also described strange lights hovering above the pool. Eerie stuff. Now, our next job is to make our way through a big housing estate to the west of the pool. This section will see us past the local surgery and a small shop on Morningside. The vast majority of this bit, though, will be housing, so this is the perfect time to chuck in a mention of some famous names. As we know, Gordon Banks lived in Madeley, but he wasn't the only well-known face that frequented these parts. Another one was a rock legend, a certain Ian Kilmister, which 99.9% of you out there will know as Lemmy, the frontman of Motorhead. Although Lemmy was born in Burslem, which is a suburb of Stoke, he actually grew up in a combination of Newcastle under Lyme and Madeley. Arguably, though, he spent more time here. And if you're not familiar with Motorhead, why the hell not? Remember William Bridges Adams from the War episode? Well, he wasn't born or raised in Madeley, but he was educated here. He attended Madeley School. I'll tell you who was born here though, the cricketer Paul Goodwin, who plays as a minor counties wicketkeeper. Okay, so we're about to head towards the railway line, which is a very important thing here in Madeley. You'll understand why in a few moments' time. You can't catch a train here in Madeley anymore because there's no station, but you can catch a bus. And here we have a bus stop, number 85, between Knapwich and Newcastle under Lyme, is what you can get from this stop on Isaac Walton Way. At the end of Moss Lane, look closely at these houses and you may notice one that's different to the others. It's a former chapel which has now been converted into a house. Chapels were all over this place. Only one is still in use today and we'll see it later. Briefly, we're out onto the A525, but only for a short distance. We're using it to cross a railway line, which you can do by walking over this bridge. The railway that's under our feet here is the West Coast Main Line, which runs alongside the village for its whole length. Madeley used to be served by 2 railway stations, but only one was on the West Coast Main Line. It closed in the 1950s, and you can still see where it was if you know where to go. That's where we're heading, but we need to get off this bridge first. After crossing the railway line, we turn left into Manor Road. If you were to follow this, the urban nature of Madeley melts away rapidly into glorious open countryside, and on the right as it does, there's the site of the old manor house. That's how this road gets its name. You have to walk a long way to get to that though, and we're not going that far. We will though talk about this sports ground. This ground is the home of Madeley White Star, the local football team. They are a charter standard club, providing football for the local community and the surrounding area. There is some evidence from Staffordshire FA records of a Madeley team being affiliated to the league in 1895. However, Madeley White Star started life as Madeley All Saints, playing in the Market Drayton League, where they won the league championship 6 times on the trot. In 1906, Madeley White Star was formed from the church Bible class by Ernest Buckley, who served as club secretary for 70 years. They therefore owe their heritage to the church and Reverend Charles Griffin, who gifted Buckley £60 to get the club going. The club disbanded twice due to World War I, but they reformed both times. In 1931, they moved into the Crewe District League, and in 1932 became one of the founder members of the Newcastle League. They've had loads of support from some legendary football names. With people like Sir Stanley Matthews and the late Gordon Banks behind them, it's no wonder that this club has been a proud bastion of local football. Raising money for good causes and supporting the local elderly folk, the club united a community of miners, farmers and potters. Today, with 11 teams across the junior and youth leagues and 1 adult team, the club is rebuilding itself as a hub of local footballing talent. Madeley White Star have produced some outstanding winning teams and academy youth players for both Stoke City and Port Vale. Right, so now we're crossing back over the railway line. Just missed a train, by the way. I don't know whether you can just about see it in the distance. It's literally just gone past. It's probably too far away now. They do move at quite a speed. So this bridge is pretty much the only thing left now of the station that used to serve Madeley. There were 2 stations actually. So here we have the site of Madeley's former station on the West Coast Main Line. This closed in 1954, but in its time it dealt with a lot more than just your average standard rail commuters. This station was previously a stabling point for the Royal Train. Madeley had a second station, and it was to the south of this on the North Staffordshire Railway branch line to Market Drayton. Known as Madeley Road, that one was in operation between 1870 and 1931. During the 1960s though, Madeley Road Station was reopened. It was temporarily used as a mess room by British Rail train crew and shunters for running around coal trains destined for both Silverdale and Holditch collieries. Those trains came off the West Coast Main Line via the Madeley Cord until Silverdale Colliery closed in 1998. After hopping over the line again, we're on Station Road. About halfway up this road back towards the A525, there's a block of almshouses. They were originally built in 1645, paid for by money left in the will of Sir John Offley. Keep his name in mind, it'll be more important to us in a minute. They were extended and improved by Hungerford, Baron of Crewe in 1889 and again in 1968. Since then, they've been further improved with modern kitchens and bathrooms. Extensive re-roofing was carried out in 2016 at a cost of £35,000. In 2023, the windows to the front of the properties, which were originally iron-framed in oak surrounds, were replaced as per the originals. That cost another £46,000. Newcastle under Lyme Borough Council supplied £5,000 of that total. The rest came from Offley's charity. Okay, we've reached the A525 again, and for the most part, the rest of this walk will just be following this road back up towards the Madeley Centre and the College Gardens estate where we began this video. Those birds in the sky are pretty off-putting, trying to talk, and they're just shouting over me. How very dare they? Now, for the remainder of this walk, 95% of the time we'll be sticking to the main road, the A525. The majority of Madeley sits between the West Coast Main Line and the M6, but oddly, there's no direct access to either if you live here. The A525, therefore, is essential as the primary route. Almost everything of note in Madeley's past has grown up alongside this very road. Churches, chapels, pubs, shops, businesses, you name it, this road has seen it all. It's definitely seen schools in its time, and you don't have to go far to see a bit of evidence for that. Now, in terms of schools, Madeley has one primary and one secondary. There's another primary school in Madeley Heath. This building is Madeley's old primary school. It was built in 1875 and was further extended in 1877. There's also a mid-20th century red brick extension to the rear. Education in Madeley owes its very existence to Sir John Offley. He lived at Madeley Manor and died in 1658, but before he did, he endowed the Almshouses through his will. But that's not all. He also endowed two schools, one for boys, the other for girls. Behind the old school is the current school, Sir John Offley C of E. This is very 1960s and 1970s, isn't it? It's far less impressive than the old school. That said, it remains key to Madeley Village, serving the children of the area very well. Thank you very much. Incidentally, the road this sits on is also related to Sir John Offley, indirectly. He was a friend of Isaac Walton, who dedicated the first edition of his famous book, The Complete Angler, to him. That's why the school sits on a road called Isaac Walton Way. Madeley's parish church is dedicated to All Saints and was in existence by the end of the 12th century. It has a Norman arcade and an early English nave. The chancel was rebuilt in 1872 to the design of Charles Lynham, a local North Staffordshire architect. The church is notable for its windows, one designed by William Morris, one by Burne-Jones, and a third by Ford Madox Brown. Now here's an unusual use for an old red phone box. We're used to seeing them being book exchanges and stuff like that. Here in Madeley, the phone box is now the Madeley prayer box. The Madeley prayer box. And it says there, what do you want to say to God? Well, I could say a few things to him, quite frankly. Next is another building that helps put Madeley on the map. This is Madeley Old Hall, a black and white Elizabethan house which has now been turned into a small hotel. It stands in 2 acres of landscape gardens and carries a Grade 2 listed building status. Built in the late 1500s, it's a timber-framed building with plaster infill, and it stands on a sandstone plinth, originally with a cruciform floor plan. Across the front gable of the house is a carved warning which reads, "Walk, knave, what lookest at?" I've no idea what that means. Now we're walking alongside the big pool to the south of Madeley Mill. There was once a butcher's shop opposite the pool that was run by Arthur Bailey. Fun fact, his wife Marjorie Pearce was one of the team who established the Christie Hospital in Manchester. Next we have the Offley Arms. The Offley as a pub is an absolute delight. It's full of charm and character, and it has the added advantage that it overlooks the famous Madeley Pool. It's a classic country inn with great local beer and home-cooked food. The building dates from the 16th century. It has an original oak frame which is still evident in the attic space. In the 18th century, the frame was clad in brick, which is how it's presented today. Around the back, there's a stable building, which is now known as the Lantern Room. Stables would have been needed here. You see, the A525 was a toll road, and so stables were required for horses whilst the pub functioned as a coaching inn. It provided sustenance to travellers and services to the coaching teams. If you're passing, look out for its restored pub sign, which hangs proudly at the entrance. And this is the perfect time to segue into a piece on the manor house. The Offley Arms is of course named after the Offley family, who were pretty important to Madeley's history in the 16th century. The manor, though, was previously in the possession of the Staffords. When the Staffords' estates were forfeited to the Crown in 1547, they were eventually bought by the Offley family. The Offleys married into the Crewe family of Crewe Hall in 1679. It was this alliance which in due course caused the decline of the manor house in Madeley itself. That's because the family chose Crewe Hall as their home instead. How very dare they, eh? However, the medieval manor house of Madeley was rebuilt by the Offleys, and it was illustrated in Dr. Robert Plott's Natural History of Staffordshire, published in 1686. The illustration shows a very fine house indeed, with elaborate formal gardens. With the Offley crew still spending their time at Crewe Hall mainly though, Madeley Manor fell into disrepair again, and it was eventually demolished in 1793. Manor Farm was built using materials from that demolition. Now, all of that sounds fair enough, but you could so easily get confused by this. Madeley had two manor houses. The now demolished manor house was originally built in the 14th century. It was known as Madeley Castle, but in reality it was a fortified manor house. It's now a ruin with only fragments of its walls remaining since its demolition in 1793. The remnants have Grade 2 listed building status, and the site is a scheduled ancient monument. You can find the remains of it by following Manor Road south from the station on the West Coast Main Line. But there was another manor house, built much later. In fact, it still stands. It's to the north of the former Madeley College site off Heighley Castle Way. Don't confuse the two. One is ancient and full of history, the other is much more modern. As we learned earlier, there was a chapel near the railway bridge. Chapels were in fact dotted all over the place here. Poolside had at least one, and it's this. Built for the Primitive Methodists in 1856, this is still in use to this day. In fact, this is the only Methodist church still active in Madeley. All the others have closed and been converted into other things. The Wesleyan Methodists built their first chapel in 1831 in Moss Lane. The formation of the United Methodist Free Church led to a further chapel at Parkside in 1853. Now we've reached a bend in the road where the A525 swings eastwards towards Middle Madeley and Little Madeley. These days, those are all part of Madeley Village because it's all expanded into one big settlement. Now on this corner, there used to be a pub called the Greyhound. Not a great deal is known about the Greyhound, but it was marked on the 1900 map. It was a white building and it stood at the junction of New Road and Newcastle Road, where the notice board now is. It became a private house, but was later knocked down. It hasn't been totally forgotten though. Madeley has a shopping precinct on the same corner which is called Greyhound Court, a reference to the former pub. The row of shops was built by the Woolliscroft family who lived down Furnace Lane. Among its facilities it has a general store, a pet shop, a dentist and a hairdresser's. Well, in this garden here, where that little monument of the swan is, or whatever you want to call it, there is the parish notice board, and I have put a card in here. The only trouble is, it's landed upside down. It's in there, you see. So no one can actually read it, but never mind. I'm sure the next time somebody comes to open this board and put something on the board, they'll see my cards in there, and hopefully they'll put it on there with the rest of it. Now we've got one more sort of section left on the main walk here. Next up we've got a secondary school. Next door to the shopping centre we have Madeley High School. Established in 1957, this is a co-educational secondary school with academy status, although it was founded as a secondary modern before becoming a comprehensive high school and then a specialist technology college. As the latter, it had joint second specialisms in arts and cognition and learning. Madeley High School converted to academy status in 2013 and it's now sponsored by the Shaw Education Trust. Like other schools of its kind, Madeley caters for children between the ages of 11 and 16. It mainly serves the area lying to the west of Newcastle under Lyme, including the communities of Keele, Betley, Mare, Aston, Muckleston, Ashley, Knighton, Rhinehill, Almington, Onneley, Loggerheads and of course Madeley itself. It has a few notable alumni. Two current English League footballers attended this school, Crewe Alexandra's Lewis Moult and ex-Port Vale man Nathan Smith, who's currently at Tranmere Rovers. It's also educated the actor Bradley James and the actress Francesca Mills. Okay, we have two things left to see before we return to College Gardens. On Madeley Court is a working men's club and institute, a well-loved local that allows dogs. It's fair to say there's a lot of people online that can't get enough of this place. And lastly, we have Middle Madeley Park. This is a recreational space now, but it used to be part of the college grounds. Before that, it was a piece of parkland that belonged to the Manor House, which sat to the north of the College Gardens estate. Now they're handy, these footpaths that cross parks. They take you to all sorts of places. Now, that particular footpath has taken us back into the College Gardens estate. Here we go, we're back in it, you see. This is where we began. It's taken me about an hour and a half to walk around Madeley, and I think that's a decent effort, quite frankly. But we're not done with this yet. Oh no, 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 no. We still have to go and see Madeley Heath, which is another settlement entirely. Time to hop in the car. So, now we're in a place called Madeley Heath. This is considered by some people to be part of Madeley Village, but it's not. Well, not yet anyway. Madeley Heath is part of the parish though. It's divided from the main village by a short green belt and the route of the M6. Industrial development came to the northeastern side of the parish as a result of huge coal and iron ore deposits being discovered in the area. Around the pits, settlements developed, and in some regards this part of Madeley is a vastly different community. Madeley Heath was, and still is, a very industrial village. Things like coal, bricks and tiles were produced here. It used to be a typical mining village with terraced roads and railway lines running all over the place. It's a bit different now, but its past is still noticeable. Right then, here we are in Madeley Heath, and I'm standing on a footpath called the Newcastle Way. And this runs right through this village. You can see we're in a fairly modern bit of it here, but Madeley Heath has been around for a long, long, long time. And these modern houses don't really tell you the whole story of the place. It's so very different to what you've so far seen. Let's see how. It has a pub to call its own. This is the Old Swan, and it was built in 1891. The Old Swan used to be on a crossroads before the current road to Newcastle was amended. The road led on to the mines at Layset. In 1988, this pub underwent something of a refurbishment and it was closed for a while. When it reopened, its first customer was not a human. It was a 29-stone Canadian black bear which had come from Gandhi's circus. That must have been quite a sight around here. Opposite the pub there's an alleyway which connects Newcastle Road to Crewe Road. The locals know this even today as the Clappy Hatch. When the houses on Newcastle Road were built in the 1930s, there used to be a wooden swinging gate here. When it was opened, it made a clapping noise. Madeley Heath has a school. This is Meadows Primary, and as you can maybe tell straight away, this wasn't just a school in its early days. Instead, this was St Mark's Church, originally built in 1861 as a mission building. It had its own schoolroom, but it wasn't a mainstream school. St Mark's Church later became that though, and served the population of Little Madeley and Madeley Heath. Eventually it would turn into Meadows Primary School. It still stands where it always has on Newcastle Road, and the buildings haven't altered one jot. Where Newcastle Road and Crewe Road meet, there's a war memorial. It's a sandstone sculpture that honours those who served in the 2 World Wars around here. The Grade 2 listed structure features a soldier with a reversed rifle on a square plinth. The names of the fallen are underneath. Not far up the road, you come to a street on the right that leads to a big industrial area. Down there is a company called Marley, which make tiles. This bit of Madeley Heath has been making tiles for years. A lot of you local people may remember the name Dignus, which is seemingly gone now. The Dignus tile factory holds a piece of history that's not very well known. It stands on, or at least close to, the site of a World War II prisoner of war camp. It was numbered 193. Unfortunately, very little is known about it. Records were destroyed for many POW sites after the war ended. On the next corner there's another sort of memorial. This is a local miners' monument, built to commemorate the efforts of the men who risked their lives for coal in this part of Staffordshire. Madeley Parish contains the remains of a massive coal mine at Lycett, to the north of here. Although located at Lycett, the mine was known as Madeley under the National Coal Board. It was originally known as Lycett Colliery though. The colliery had 5 shafts, all with rather exotic sounding names. They were Bang Up, Fair Lady, Clark's, Harrison's and Woodburn. Mining at Lycett began in Roman times and continued into the 19th century. It was in 1801 when a leasehold agreement was taken out for 33 years to mine coal on land at Lycett between John the First Lord Crewe, Walter Snade of Keele, Thomas Breek of Keele and James Breek of Newcastle. By 1834, local industrialist Thomas Firmston had taken over the lease and in 1838 constructed a 3.5-mile tramway from the colliery to link up with the main line station at Madeley. That was to help transport his coal all over the country. The pit closed on the 21st of September 1957 and there's nothing left of it nowadays. What did immediately after closure was subject to open cast mining and that removed the remaining coal and the slag heaps. Now the former mine site is either woodland or it's used for agriculture. As for Lycett village, it was never as big as the colliery might have perhaps encouraged it to be. It was though served by Lycett railway station on the North Staffordshire Railway, and it had a miners' institute, a church, a shop, a post office, a surgery and a school. It also had a recreation ground built by the miners, and that had both a cricket and a football pitch. It later gained tennis courts and a bowling green. In all senses, Lycett was a typical miners' village, very similar to those we've seen in other coal-rich areas of the country. However, by the mid-1960s, most of Lycett had been demolished. The effects of colliery closure were felt massively, despite the fact a lot of coal remained untouched. The only buildings left in Lycett now are the old school, the station house, and a row of dwellings at Park Terrace. The bulk of Lycett's community lived in terraced houses on roads called Top Street, Middle Street and Bottom Street. They have now completely gone, and today where they were resembles an orchard. On the former Miners' Welfare Institute is an office for a recycling yard. The football pitch, tennis court and bowling green have long since gone, but Lycett Cricket Club still exists, having been started by the miners in around 1870. It continues to this day, playing in one of the top leagues in the country. Former England fast bowler Dean Headley once played for the club. And close to the cricket ground is Finney Green, where in 1970 a local farmer by the name of Ted Askey allowed his field to be used to host a Hollywood music festival. It attracted 45,000 people over the weekend, with acts such as Black Sabbath, Mungo Jerry and the Grateful Dead. And this memorial is, of course, for everybody who worked in the pits around here. But it specifically mentions 63 people on its plaque. I'll just show you this. A bit difficult to get to this, but it says, in memory of the 63 miners who lost their lives in the Lycett pit disaster, January 21st, 1880. And then it goes on to say also all those who worked in the industry. Now, let's have a look at another pub next. We're going to head this way, back towards where we started here in Madeley Heath, because next it's the Crewe Arms. This next building is the Crewe Arms Hotel. Now, if you look for this on old maps of Madeley Heath, you won't find it, but you might still find a pub called the Crewe Arms elsewhere. Let's explain. In 1891, the Crewe Arms Hotel was originally situated in Madeley Village. It was next to the former West Coast Main Line station, which we saw earlier, but it would later move here to Wharf Terrace thanks to the coal mining activity in the area. I guess wherever there were thirsty miners, pubs followed. This place would have served other workers too though. As we know, Madeley Heath had a tile works, but it also made bricks. Our last act here is to cross the local playing field, and this used to be Madeley Heath's brickworks. On the old maps at the beginning of this video, this is shown as a quarry-like depression. It had a short railway line or tramway running through it, and around the edge there were terraced houses. Madeley Heath was a hugely industrious place, what with coal, bricks and tiles. It's also vastly different now that the heavy industry has mostly disappeared. Okay, we are all the way around Madeley Heath. That was a bit quicker than I thought actually, and I haven't put it on the Strava actually because I didn't feel it needed to be. So we have one more thing left to do here in the parish of Madeley, and that is to go and find Heighley Castle. And so to finish, we find ourselves to the north of Madeley at the remains of Heighley Castle. Not that you can see much of it though. Most of Heighley Castle is hidden behind trees on a hill to the north of this lane. There are some ruins there, they're just obscured. Heighley Castle was one of the most important buildings in Staffordshire. It was completed by the Audley family in 1233, and for over 300 years it was one of their ancestral homes. Heighley Castle was built by Henry de Aldithley, a name that would later morph into Audley or de Audley. Henry de Audley was a pretty powerful man. He was the Sheriff of Shropshire between 1227 and 1232. The same man also built another fortification, Red Castle, over the border in Shropshire. Also, the Cistercian Abbey of St Mary at Hulton was endowed by him in 1223. The ruinous remains of Heighley consist of several masonry fragments, but they're mostly overgrown by vegetation. The site is considered a scheduled ancient monument, and the ruins have a Grade 2 listing. What remains of the castle is privately owned, and it's not open to visitors. Heighley Castle was not the sole household in which the Audleys lived. As well as Red Castle, they also held Buglaughton Manor in Congleton, Newhall Tower at Combermere, and another unnamed home in Nantwich. These all served as residences for the extended family. They were a big bunch. Heighley was, though, built as a hilltop fortress. It was considered to sit in something called the Marches, which was the English defence line against any potential Welsh invasion. This is why it stands on such a lofty rock. It would have been easy to see the Welsh forces from here. Heighley Castle, like most if not all of the ones across Staffordshire, acted as a garrison and a muster point in times of trouble. It existed at a time when civil wars and wars with the French, Welsh and Scots were common. Honestly, there weren't many periods when peace broke out. The best time to see the remains is during the winter, when remnants of the small section of wall and arcading are just visible from Nantwich Road above Heighley Castle Farm. The castle is known to have contained a great hall, a kitchen, a private family apartment, and lots of offices. So why is it in ruins? To answer that, we have to consider its position during the English Civil War. Heighley was a royalist stronghold, and so it was ordered to be demolished by a parliamentary committee sitting at Stafford in 1644 to prevent its use by them. There are no known images of what the castle looked like throughout its history. By piecing together dates from books and notes, all we can really do is imagine what it was like. Damn those parliamentarians for removing this important piece of Madeley's history. And so, we finished this mammoth trip around Madeley. If you think this one was big, you haven't seen anything yet. I can only think of maybe one or two that are smaller than this in Newcastle under Lyme, and one of those is coming tomorrow. I hope you like a drink. The next one has a lot of pubs. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.